If you had seen me that evening, walking into the backyard of my father's Aspen estate in a navy suit and low heels, quiet among the laughter and clinking champagne glasses, you might have thought I was just another guest. But I wasn't. I was the daughter no one invited. The celebration was grand, of course it was. Douglas Lane didn't do anything small. It was his 70th birthday, and retirement party rolled into one. He had built a banking empire in Denver, and tonight, over 120 guests gathered under string lights and rented tents to toast his legacy. Waiters weaved through with silver trays. A jazz trio played softly under a white pergola. It looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine, and yet not one of them expected me. I stood near the edge of the crowd for a moment, steadying my breath, leather folder in hand. It was embossed with gold, Douglas A. Lane. I had no plan to make a scene. I wasn't here to fight or even to be acknowledged. I came with one thing, a gift. One he didn't deserve, but that I needed to give, for myself. I spotted him at the head table, standing tall, glass of Pinot in hand. His silver hair glinted in the light. Next to him, my stepmother Marla wore that familiar pale green dress, the one she always wore to family portraits I was never invited to. He tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "before we wrap up this beautiful night, I have one last thing to share." I froze mid-step. His voice, calm, charismatic, cut through the music. "I want to officially announce the terms of my estate," he said with a chuckle. The crowd leaned in. He looked directly at me. "To my son Blake, I leave the Aspen house, the accounts, the ranch, everything. As for Morgan, well, she's not my biological child. I suppose I forgot to put her name in the will." Laughter exploded. Not polite chuckles. Real, loud, unfiltered laughter. Glasses clinked. Someone muttered, "Classic Doug." Even Marla cracked a smile, eyes carefully avoiding mine. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just walked forward, slow and silent, heels tapping against the stone pavers like a metronome ticking down the end of something. When I reached the head table, I placed the folder gently in front of the cake, a three-tiered thing decorated in gold fondant and edible pearls. Blake, lounging with a whiskey glass, smirked. "Oh, so you did bring a gift," he said, loud enough for people to hear. "Let me guess, something you made on your little architecture blog?" I ignored him. I opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, thick, cream-colored parchment. I held it up, turning slightly so the bold heading caught the light. "Grant of property transfer, parcel 107B, Roaring Pines Preserve, Pitkin County, Colorado." Gasps. I spoke, my voice even and clear. "I bought this for you," I said. "A $3.7 million property just north of Snowmass. Off-grid capable, panoramic views. Could have been your dream escape." Douglas's smile faltered. "It's yours," I added. Or, it was. Then I tore the paper in half. A gasp rippled through the tables like a wave hitting stone. I tore it again, and again, until nothing remained but fluttering scraps of white drifting down over the cake and the wine glasses, and the carefully planned legacy he thought he controlled. For a moment no one moved, no one laughed now. Douglas just stared at the pieces, mouth slightly open, hands at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. I met his eyes. "I didn't come to be forgiven," I said. "I came to show you what I've built, without you." And then I turned. No applause, no shouting, just the sound of silence and my own heartbeat, carrying me back through the crowd, out the gate, and into the night. Behind me the string lights flickered, the music hesitated, and under the weight of his own silence, my father stood among the ruins of the only gift that ever mattered. I used to think being adopted meant I was chosen, special, even. That's what Marla told me when I was 5 and asked why I didn't have baby pictures like the other kids at daycare. She knelt beside my bed, brushed my hair back, and said, "You didn't grow in my belly, sweetheart. You grew in my heart." I held on to that like it was a superpower. My full name back then was Morgan Lane, and I wore it like a crown. I was the daughter of Douglas Lane, a respected banker who people nodded to on the street, and Marla Lane, a woman who always smelled like lavender and peppermint tea. We weren't rich, but we had stability. Sunday pancakes, a Labrador named Pepper, and bedtime stories with silly voices. And for a while, I believed I belonged. That all changed the year I turned 8. Marla got pregnant. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room with a balloon tied to my wrist and a stuffed bear in my lap. A nurse handed me a sticker that said Big Sister, like it was supposed to mean something magical. But from the moment Blake arrived, it was like the gravity in our house shifted, and I fell out of orbit. Suddenly, every photo on the fridge was of him. Every conversation circled around nap schedules and milestones. When I showed Marla a painting I made in school, she barely looked up from bottle feeding him. "That's nice, honey," she'd say, eyes still on Blake's tiny face. I told myself it was normal. Babies need more attention. That's what the books say, right? But the distance kept growing. One night at dinner, I spilled apple juice. It wasn't even that much, just a little across the table. My dad stood up quickly and snapped, "This one's not even blood." He said it under his breath, thought I didn't hear. But I did, and I never forgot. After that, things changed in ways that couldn't be fixed with bedtime stories. My awards were tucked into drawers while Blake's finger paintings got framed. I stopped getting just because hugs. I stopped asking for them too. Instead, I became useful. I folded laundry. I made Blake's school lunches. I helped Marla wrap presents for birthdays I wasn't invited to anymore. I learned how to shrink myself so no one had to make room. And still, I tried. God, I tried. I left handmade cards on their pillows. I memorized everyone's coffee order. I cleaned the whole house before my dad's clients came over, hoping maybe he'd look at me and see someone worthy of love. But it was like chasing sunlight through blinds, always one step behind, never quite touching. By the time I turned 15, I stopped trying. That was the year I realized being adopted didn't make me chosen. It made me optional. I stopped calling Douglas Dad in my diary, stopped waiting for Marla to sit on my bed at night, stopped hoping someone would remember my birthday without a Facebook reminder. That knowledge settled deep in my chest, not like a scream, but like a silence that never left. A kind of quiet that wraps around your ribs and makes you forget how to breathe deeply. I didn't rebel, I didn't slam doors or sneak out. I planned. I sketched floor plans in the margins of my notebooks. I studied late into the night, earbuds in, while Blake had birthday sleepovers downstairs. I stacked every bit of rejection into the foundation of a future where I wouldn't need to be seen to matter. Because somewhere in me, a quiet voice whispered, "One day, they'll realize what they let go." And when that day came, I wanted to be ready. I left the morning I turned 18. No party, no hugs, no, "we'll miss you," just a silent kitchen, cold toast on a chipped plate, and the sound of Douglas rustling his newspaper like it was any other Tuesday. Marla handed me a grocery bag with some snacks, trail mix, a half-used tube of toothpaste, and $20. "Good luck out there," she said, her voice breezy, like I was going on a camping trip instead of leaving home for good. Blake didn't even look up from the Xbox. He was shouting into a headset, mid-game, as I closed the door behind me. I had $500 in my wallet, a scholarship acceptance folded neatly in my backpack, and one other thing, a rolled-up sketch of a house I had designed by hand when I was 14. My dream house. High ceilings, reclaimed wood beams, floor-to-ceiling windows that welcomed the light. That drawing had traveled with me through every rejection, every night I cried myself to sleep. It reminded me, I would build something of my own, something that lasted. That morning I boarded a Greyhound bus to Portland. I had never even been there. But it sounded like a place where things could grow, where someone like me could start fresh. The first year was brutal. I rented a garage apartment with no insulation. Winter nights were so cold I had to sleep in my coat, wrapped in 2 thrifted blankets and a heating pad that barely worked. My mattress sat on the floor, and there was duct tape over the cracked window to keep the wind out. I worked the front desk at a 24-hour gym from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., then went to classes with a coffee that I refilled with hot water twice before buying another. On weekends, I tutored high school students in algebra and geometry, sometimes at their kitchen tables, sometimes in the back of a public library. I ate instant ramen 5 nights a week. Tuesdays were special. I let myself buy a cinnamon roll from the bakery on 5th Avenue if I hadn't cried that week. And yet, I was alive, more alive than I'd ever been under Douglas's roof. I wasn't being seen, but I also wasn't being judged. I didn't belong to anyone, but for the first time I belonged somewhere. Architecture school was tough, but but it was also magic. I fell in love with materials: bamboo composites, solar shingles, clay panels. I spent nights sketching blueprints and redesigning floor plans just for the thrill of it. I'd sit on my floor under a single lamp and imagine homes that breathed with the land, spaces that sheltered people, really held them, in ways I never was. Professors started to notice. By my junior year, I was offered a paid internship at a green design firm. The pay was trash, but I didn't care. I said yes before they could change their minds. At night, while my classmates were out drinking or binge-watching shows, I was at my desk with pencil smudges on my cheek and my dream house taped to the wall behind me like a compass pointing north. I didn't call home. They didn't call me. At graduation, I didn't send an invitation. I walked across the stage in a pressed black gown and shook hands with the dean. The seat saved for my family was empty, and I didn't even glance at it, because by then, I had learned that silence can be the loudest kind of goodbye. I stepped off that stage with no applause, no bouquet, but with something far more powerful: a promise to myself. One day, I'd build more than just houses. I'd build places where people like me could feel safe, could feel seen, and I would never, never make someone feel optional. I didn't start Havencore Design in some fancy loft with a view. I started it in a basement apartment in Southeast Portland, with a folding table, a secondhand laptop, and 3 potted succulents that I named after women I admired: Maya, Ruth, and Jane. There was no funding, no mentor, no backup plan. Just me, a Wix website I built at 2 a.m., and a mission I wrote in Sharpie on a sticky note above my desk. Never build for ego, always build for belonging. The architecture world is loud, full of buzzwords and men in black turtlenecks designing glass mansions no one actually lives in. But I didn't want to build for awards. I wanted to build for the people who never got handed a blueprint, people like me. My first client was a woman named Trina Delgado. She called on a Thursday morning, her voice soft but steady. A friend had forwarded her my website. Nothing fancy, just a logo, a photo of my old duplex project, and a note that said, "We design homes that hold the people who need them most." Trina was a single mom with 2 kids and a plot of land she'd inherited from her grandfather. Every other firm had quoted her numbers she couldn't afford. Some didn't even return her calls. "I don't need fancy," she told me. "I need dry walls, natural light, and a kitchen I can dance in with my kids." I met her at the lot that Saturday. It was small, uneven, overgrown, but I saw it. The possibility. The way the sun hit the east corner just right. The way a narrow garden could run along the fence line. The way a home, a real one, could rise from this forgotten space. I went home that night and stayed up sketching. By Tuesday, we had a plan. The house would be small but sustainable, built from reclaimed wood, equipped with passive cooling, solar panels, and wide windows to chase the light. Trina cried when she saw the 3D render. We broke ground in March. It took 6 months, 17 volunteers, and 3 city inspections. But when we were done, Trina had her home. And more than that, she had her dignity. She moved in with her kids on a rainy Saturday morning. That night, she sent me a photo. Her youngest asleep on the living room rug, her older son drawing superheroes on the kitchen chalk wall I had added last minute. The caption just said, "We feel safe." The local paper picked up the story. "A sustainable sanctuary for a single mom," the headline read. The phone didn't stop ringing after that. By the end of the year, Havencore had 6 projects lined up. I brought on 2 interns, rented a modest office near Hawthorne, and finally swapped my basement desk for one with actual drawers. But even as the work grew, I kept that sticky note pinned above every desk I touched. Never build for ego, always build for belonging. We designed transitional housing for women leaving domestic violence shelters, renovated an old motel into apartments for foster youth, partnered with a nonprofit to build homes for veterans on city-owned land. Every floor plan carried a story. Every project reminded me, the most important structures aren't made of steel or concrete, they're made of intention, of love, of second chances. I still had my dream house sketch, folded neatly in a file behind my desk. But now, I understood something I hadn't before. Maybe I didn't need to build that house for myself. Maybe I had already built it, one wall, one soul, one story at a time. It started with a whisper. Not a voice exactly, more like a thought that kept circling in the quiet, just loud enough to hear when the world slowed down. I had ignored it for weeks, burying myself in work, staying late at the office, drinking coffee at midnight while reviewing floor plans that no longer felt urgent. But that message, it wouldn't leave. It was a text from an old classmate I hadn't spoken to in years. "Your dad's having a big party, retirement and 70th birthday. Thought you'd want to know." I stared at it for a long time. Didn't reply, deleted it, then undeleted it. I didn't care. At least that's what I told myself. But late at night, the voice came back. What if you showed up, not to be forgiven, not to be accepted, but to prove you didn't need either? That's when I remembered something my father once said, years ago, back when I was 10. I had just been picked last for kickball, and I sat sulking on the porch while he watered the lawn. "I don't need friends," I muttered. He barely looked up. "You know what matters, Morgan?" he said. "Owning land. That's how people respect you." He probably forgot that moment. But I didn't. So I started searching. It took 3 months, but I found it. 47 acres just outside Aspen, pine forest, mountain views, quiet, untouched. It felt like standing inside a postcard. No roads, no neighbors, just the sound of wind and possibility. It cost $3.7 million. I didn't hesitate. It wasn't just about the land, it was about what it meant. I could give him everything he said mattered, even if he gave me nothing. I worked with my attorney to draft the deed, transferred the title into Douglas's name, no strings attached, no press, no ceremony, just a leather-bound folder with a gold-embossed label, Douglas A. Lane, Roaring Pines Estate. It was never meant as a bribe, it wasn't a performance, it was a farewell. A quiet ending to a long, aching sentence I never got to finish. I imagined myself walking into the party, not to speak, not to make a scene, but to leave the folder behind. That's it. A silent gesture, a closed loop, a final page. I rehearsed what I might say if he asked. "Happy birthday, Dad. I wanted to give you something that reflects who I am. No hard feelings, just closure." But I didn't expect he'd even listen. I wasn't doing it for him, I was doing it for me. To say, without saying, "You erased me." But I didn't disappear. The night before the party, I laid the folder on my desk and stared at it. Inside was the deed, a letter, unsigned, a map of the land, and a single line I had written at the bottom. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk in with something they can't ignore and walk out without needing anything at all. I went to bed that night with a strange stillness in my chest. Not peace exactly, but readiness. I wasn't the girl who used to beg to be seen. I was the woman who could give away a mountain and still stand taller than the man who once made her feel small. The drive to Aspen took 9 hours. I didn't play music, I didn't stop for snacks. Just me, the silence, and the folder resting on the passenger seat like a second heartbeat. When I pulled up to the Lane estate, the house where I once watched snow fall through the skylight as a child, it looked the same. Impeccable lawn, warm lights glowing through arched windows. A valet in a crisp black vest nodded as I parked. No one recognized me. That was the point. Inside, the party was in full swing. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter echoed beneath chandeliers, and the band played some slow jazz number that belonged in a high-end retirement catalog. I stood near the edge of the crowd, watching. There was Marla, radiant in emerald satin, floating from table to table like royalty. There was Blake, laughing too loudly, too often, flashing his cufflinks like they were war medals. And then, there he was, Douglas Lane. Standing at the head of the room, glass raised high, voice booming with practiced charm. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate legacy, we honor history, we toast to the future." The guests cheered. I stepped forward. He spotted me mid-sentence, froze for half a second, then adjusted his posture like a man preparing for a photograph. "Well, well," Blake said, eyes narrowing. "Look who decided to show up." I kept walking. "You sure you're in the right place?" he added, louder this time. "Or did the charity gala let out early?" A few people chuckled. I didn't answer. Douglas cleared his throat and tapped the mic. "I suppose this is the perfect moment," he said, eyes now locked on mine, "to share something a bit more personal." I knew it before he said it. "I want to officially announce the terms of my estate," he declared. To my son Blake, I leave the Aspen house, the Denver properties, the accounts, the ranch, everything. A pause. And then, as for Morgan, well, she's not my biological daughter. I must have forgotten to include her. Laughter. Actual, rolling laughter. Champagne glasses clinked again. I didn't blink. I just walked, slow, steady, toward the head table. When I reached it, I placed the leather folder down gently. No words. Blake scoffed. "Oh, she did bring a gift," he said, leaning in. "Is it one of those Pinterest vision boards?" More laughter. I opened the folder, removed the single page, held it up. The gold title gleamed. Grant of Property Transfer, Roaring Pines Estate, Aspen County. The laughter died. "This," I said calmly, "was for you." Eyes turned. Forks froze midair. 47 acres, mountain view, no mortgage, off-grid ready, worth $3.7 million. Douglas's face didn't move, but his eyes did. "This could have been yours," I added. "A place to retire, to reflect, a gift, no strings." Then I tore it in half. A gasp swept the room. I tore it again, then again, until nothing was left but snowflakes of legal parchment drifting over the birthday cake. No one spoke. No one laughed. Douglas stood motionless, lips parted, hands clenched at his sides. I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "I didn't come here to be recognized," I said. "I came to show you what I built, without your name, without your help, without your permission." Then I turned and walked away. The only sound behind me was silence, and the soft flutter of paper hitting the floor. I didn't look back, not when I stepped through the gate, not when I passed the valet still frozen beside his podium, not when the wind caught a scrap of the torn deed and carried it past my ankle like a ghost of what could have been. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove. No tears, no music, just my own breath in the silence, steady, strong, whole. I reached Portland just after sunrise. The city looked different, like it had been holding its breath for me, waiting. I stepped into my apartment, dropped the keys on the counter, and sat down at my desk still wearing my suit. I thought that was the end. But 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, a text lit up my screen. "You don't know me. My name is Erica. I work at Lane Financial. I was at your father's party. You should hear what happened after you left." I hesitated. Then I called. Her voice was calm but shaky. "I was just a kid when I met you," she said. "Maybe 12. You brought cookies to the office holiday party. No one remembered that. But I did." Then she told me everything. How the room went still after I walked out. How no one reached for their drinks. How people just stood there, stunned, like the ground had disappeared beneath their feet. "And then," she said, voice lowering, "your father, he got down on his knees." I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he bent down, in front of everyone, and started picking up the torn pieces, one by one, like he thought maybe if he gathered them all, he could make it right." My chest tightened. "And no one helped him," she added. "They just watched, until Mr. Klein, his old partner from the board, walked up and said, 'You're a fool, Douglas. That woman you humiliated, she built something you couldn't even dream of.'" I closed my eyes. "She's worth more than everything in your will," Erica whispered. "That's what he said." The party ended early. Some guests left in silence. Others approached Marla, but all she kept saying was, "We didn't know, we didn't know." Blake tried to laugh it off, called me a drama queen, suggested I probably forged the deed, but no one laughed with him this time. That night, another message arrived, this one from Aunt Vivian, Douglas's older sister. We hadn't spoken since I was 15. "He's been in his study for hours. The torn deed is still on his desk. He won't speak to anyone." I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. But that night, for the first time in a long time, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because somewhere, deep down, I still wondered, did he regret it? Did he finally see me? Not as the charity case, not as the one he forgot, but as the woman who had taken nothing and built a life from the ground up. The girl who once clung to bedtime stories and crayon drawings was still there, listening for a voice that might never come. I wanted to tell myself it didn't matter anymore. But it did, because even when you've built your own home, your own name, your own place in the world, there's still a part of you that hopes the ones who left you behind will one day whisper, "I was wrong," and that maybe, just maybe, they'll mean it. The letter arrived 2 weeks later, handwritten, no return address, the envelope slightly bent, like it had been carried in someone's coat pocket too long. Inside, it simply read, "Morgan, I don't know how to begin. I suppose that's fitting, because I never knew how to begin anything with you. I failed you. I failed to protect the bond we had when you were small. I failed to see what you were becoming. And on my birthday, in front of everyone, I failed as a father. I picked up the pieces of what you gave me, not just the paper, but the truth, and I don't know how to make it right. But I want you to know, I'm sorry. Douglas." No dad, just Douglas.